There is a kind of silence that hurts more than rejection. Not because they screamed, not because they lied, not because they said, "I don't want you," but because they felt everything and gave you almost nothing. And if you've ever cared about someone avoidant, you know that kind of silence. The delayed reply that feels too careful to be casual. The disappearing act that somehow feels more emotional than a confession. The way they go distant right after a moment that felt real. Right after the softness. Right after the eye contact. Right after you thought, finally, they're letting me in. And that's the part that scrambles you. Because if they didn't care, this wouldn't feel so charged. If they were indifferent, it wouldn't feel like something is trembling just beneath the surface. But it is. And here is the brutal truth most people never want to hear. The more you try to force an avoidant to prove what they feel, the faster they have to disconnect from it. The more you chase the truth, the more they hide inside the fog. Not because your love is too much, but because direct emotional pressure lands in their system like danger. That's why the signs they care are rarely loud, rarely cinematic, rarely easy to read. They are soft signs, invisible signs, sweet signs. The kind you miss if you're only looking for obvious devotion. Because avoidant attachment is not a lack of feeling. It is a fear of what feeling will demand from them. When closeness starts to deepen, their nervous system doesn't always interpret it as romance. Sometimes it reads it as exposure, as loss of control, as the beginning of needing someone too much. And once that fear rises, the body gets involved. The amygdala starts scanning for threat. Stress chemicals like cortisol begin to climb. Their mind starts reaching for distance before their heart can even explain what it wants. Even pleasure gets complicated, because dopamine pulls them toward connection, while old protective wiring tells them connection is exactly how they lose themselves. So they want you, and withdraw from you. They miss you, and go quiet. They feel safe for 1 second, then suddenly trapped the next. This is why so many people misread avoidance. They think distance means disinterest. They think detachment means absence of emotion. They think the silence means the bond was imagined. No. A lot of the time, they didn't stop caring. They just got overwhelmed by caring. And once you understand that, everything starts to look different. Because the real question is not, did they feel something? The real question is, how does an overwhelmed heart behave when it doesn't know how to stay? Usually, it leaves traces. Small ones, tender ones, confusing ones. The first sign you've stolen an avoidant's heart without knowing it is that they keep coming back, even after they pull away. Not dramatically, not with some huge speech. Sometimes it's a casual message, a random reaction to your story, a tiny check-in that pretends to mean nothing, but it means something. Avoidants do not circle around people they feel nothing for. They may disappear when intimacy gets too intense, but if your presence has touched something deep in them, they return to the edge of you, quietly, carefully, as if they're testing whether the door is still open without having to say they hoped it would be. That return is not accidental. It is attachment wearing a disguise. The second sign is that they remember strange little things about you. Not just the obvious facts, not your job, not your birthday, not the easy things anyone can store in memory. I mean the tiny things. The way you drink your coffee when you've had a bad day. The song you mentioned once in passing. The restaurant you said you loved as a child. The sentence you forgot you even said. Avoidants may not always know how to express affection directly, But attention is one of the purest places their feelings leak through. If they remember your emotional fingerprints, if they carry your details when they barely carry most people at all, you are not just passing through them. You have settled somewhere inside. The third sign is that they let you see them when they are not polished. This one is so easy to underestimate. An avoidant person spends a lot of energy controlling perception, staying composed, staying unreadable, staying one step ahead of vulnerability. So when they let you see them tired, irritated, insecure, messy, confused, or emotionally flat, that is not nothing. That is trust in a form that doesn't look romantic until you understand what it costs them. If they answer your call when they sound off, if they show up without their usual armor, if they admit they're overwhelmed instead of pretending they're fine, you are closer than you think. The fourth sign is subtle, but it changes everything. They watch how you respond to distance. They may not say this out loud, but part of them is always asking, what happens if I step back? What happens if I go quiet? What happens if I cannot perform closeness the way you want me to? Will you explode? Will you guilt me?
Will you make me responsible for calming your panic? Or will you stay grounded enough that I don't have to choose between caring and breathing? This is where one core concept matters more than almost anything else. Non-reactive safety. Not silence used as a weapon. Not pretending not to care. Not playing games. I mean emotional steadiness. The kind of energy that says, I can feel deeply without collapsing into pursuit. I can want you without forcing you. I can stay connected to myself while you sort through your storm. To an avoidant nervous system, that kind of steadiness is magnetic. Because most of what they fear about intimacy is not love itself, it's engulfment, it's pressure, it's emotional chaos. So when you don't chase every retreat, when you don't make every silence a courtroom, something inside them begins to soften. They start associating you with relief instead of demand. And relief is addictive to a heart that lives braced for impact. The fifth sign is that they start doing for you what they cannot yet say to you. Avoidants often translate emotion into practical care because practical care feels safer than raw confession. So they may help you with something annoying. Remember to send you something useful. Offer solutions. Fix a problem. Make sure you got home safe. Show up in a logistical way when your life is heavy. It can seem almost underwhelming if you're waiting for poetry, but this is their poetry. This is the love language of someone who feels too much to speak cleanly. They may not say, I adore you. They may say, text me when you get there. They may not say, I think about you all the time. They may send the link to that thing you needed 3 days ago. For someone avoidant, care often exits through the hands long before it reaches the mouth. The sixth sign is that they start giving you unprompted access to their inner world, but in fragments. A story from childhood, a confession wrapped in humor, a sudden honest sentence late at night, a rare moment when their voice gets quiet and they say something so real it changes the air. These moments matter because avoidants do not open in a straight line. They open in flashes. One piece, then retreat. One truth, then a joke. One vulnerable look, then distance. If someone like this lets you glimpse the hidden architecture of them, You are not ordinary to them. You have become emotionally relevant. The seventh sign is that they reach for you indirectly when they miss you. This is one of the sweetest signs because it is so clumsy and so human. They may not say, "I miss you." That would expose too much. Instead, they send something random, a meme, a song, a thought they know only you would understand. An excuse dressed up as coincidence. What they are really saying is, "You were on my mind, and I wanted contact without having to confess the depth of it." And that matters, because avoidants are often more comfortable creating a bridge than naming the ache that made them build it. The eighth sign is that your absence starts affecting them more than they expected. At first, they may seem fine. Too fine. Suspiciously fine. That is often the protective layer doing its job. Their system knows how to suppress, compartmentalize, distract. But when someone truly gets under their skin, your absence begins to echo in private. They notice the empty space where your energy used to be. They replay your words at odd hours. They feel a strange restlessness they can't explain. They compare new interactions to the calm, spark, or depth they had with you. And here is the twist. Avoidants often feel the bond most intensely when there is room to feel it. Not when they're being pressed for an answer. Not when they're cornered into defining everything. But later, in the quiet, in the stillness after the stimulation is gone. That is when suppressed attachment rises back to the surface. That is when missing you becomes undeniable. The ninth sign is that they become strangely alert to other people around you. Not always openly jealous. Avoidants often hate looking possessive because possessiveness reveals need, and need feels dangerous. But if they care, they notice. Their energy shifts when someone else gets too close. They ask questions in a tone that sounds casual but isn't. They go colder, quieter, more watchful. Or they suddenly reappear right when your attention seems to be moving elsewhere. Why? Because the thought of losing you activates what they were trying so hard not to feel. Attachment. And once that attachment wakes up, even a guarded person starts showing cracks. Not because they want to compete, because suddenly the connection is no longer theoretical. It can actually be lost. And nothing reveals hidden feelings faster than the threat of real absence. The 10th sign is the softest and the deepest of all. They begin to imagine you in their future without realizing they're doing it. It slips out in little ways. A plan next month, a place they want to take you someday, a holiday comment, a joke that assumes your presence later, a subtle inclusion of you in the rhythm of their life. For most people, that sounds normal. For an avoidant, it is intimate. Because future thinking is commitment in seed form. It means you have crossed from temporary experience into internal structure. You are no longer just someone they enjoy. You are becoming someone their mind instinctively includes. Someone their nervous system is beginning, however cautiously, to make room for. And that is no small thing. Now listen carefully, because this is where the power starts to flip. The moment an avoidant senses that you are not trying to trap them, not trying to extract reassurance every hour, not abandoning yourself just to be chosen, something changes in how they experience you. You stop feeling like pressure. You start feeling like peace. And peace is rare for them, so they think about you longer. They replay your calm. They miss the way you didn't force. They wonder why being around you felt strangely quiet inside their body. That is when the chasing can begin, even if it doesn't look like traditional pursuit. They become more curious, more consistent, more present in odd little ways. They reach out sooner than before. They linger in conversation. They start revealing what they once hid. They feel the pull. Not because you manipulated them, because your energy stopped feeding the pattern their defenses were built for. You became unfamiliar in the most healing way. But there is a warning here, and it matters. The second you notice them softening, the temptation is to grab it, to rush in, to demand clarity, to secure the feeling before it disappears. And that is exactly how the old cycle restarts. Because when an avoidant begins to feel attached, they are already close to their edge. If you turn that tender opening into pressure, interrogation, or emotional urgency, their system may slam shut again. Not because the feeling was fake, because now it feels unsafe to have. So if you recognize these signs, do not panic. Do not overreach. Do not start performing for proof. Let the bond breathe. Let their nervous system learn that love does not always become control, that closeness does not always end in engulfment, that being seen does not automatically mean being consumed. And most importantly, do not lose yourself in the process of being slowly loved by someone who is still learning how to stay. Because this is the deepest truth of all. The real power was never in making an avoidant choose you. The real power is becoming someone who no longer needs another person's confusion to define their worth. Someone whose self-respect is stronger than mixed signals. Someone who can recognize tenderness without begging it to become certainty. Someone who does not shrink, chase, over-explain, or fracture just because another person is afraid of intimacy. That is the identity shift. You are not powerful because they finally texted back. You are not valuable because they opened up. You are not worthy because an avoidant heart, after resisting everyone, made room for you. You were worthy before that, before the silence, before the longing, before the almost, before the ache of trying to decode love in a language made of distance. And ironically, the moment you truly understand that, the whole dynamic changes. Because when you stop trying to be chosen, you become unforgettable. When you stop collapsing into their withdrawal, you become emotionally rare.
When you hold your center instead of chasing their certainty, you become the kind of presence their defenses cannot easily dismiss. Not loud, not desperate, not demanding, just deeply grounded, deeply felt, deeply hard to replace. So if they keep returning, remembering, revealing, helping, circling, missing, noticing, and quietly making space for you in the future, don't dismiss it just because it doesn't look like obvious romance. Some hearts do not arrive with fireworks. Some hearts arrive trembling, half hidden, quietly overwhelmed by the very thing they want. And if you've touched an avoidant heart like that, you may never get the perfect performance. Not right away, maybe not ever. But you will feel it in the small, sacred places, in the details, in the return, in the care they try to disguise, in the silence that keeps bending back toward you. Just don't forget this while you're reading their signs. The goal is not to become the exception that finally saves them. The goal is to become so rooted in your own worth that whether they come close or not, you remain whole. And from that wholeness, everything changes. You stop chasing. You start seeing. You stop begging for love in a language that hurts you. You start recognizing what is real, even when it is quiet. And if they do come toward you, if they finally let the walls lower and the heart speak, let it meet the version of you that already knows who they are. Not the abandoned version, not the anxious version, not the version starving for proof. The steady one. The one who understands that being loved by a guarded person can feel beautiful, but being anchored in yourself is what makes you untouchable. That is the power they feel. That is the safety they remember. That is the presence they cannot shake. And sometimes, without even knowing it, that is exactly how you steal an avoidant's heart.